Our first session is Rda Updates. I am pleased to introduce our colleague, Charlene Zhou. Charlene is the head of Knowledge Access Department at the New York University Libraries, managing cataloging and metadata services. In addition to serving on the PCC Policy Committee, Rda Steering Committee, Sheer Vde Special Entity Identification Working Group, OCLC RLP Metadata Managers Focus Group, and COE Resources Metadata Task Force, Charlene has committed to the pilot project, teaching and research on linked data, multilingual resources, digital scholarship, and inclusive metadata. Please join me in welcoming Charlene. Okay, Charlene, you can take it.
Thank you, Naomi. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I think in the past 3 years, CTP invited Kathy Glennon, Rda Steering Committee Chair, provide Rda updates at this workshop for 3 years. And I think she has laid the solid foundation of official Rda Toolkit knowledge. My presentation today will focus on the highlights of the Rda updates from March 2021 to March 2020. And I would like to invite all my CJK colleagues to join us for the Rda Toolkit implementation. Next, please. So you can see agenda. I try to organize in the 4 categories. The first is the Rda updates from the Rda Steering Committee. And the second one is the next release. The March release will happen on March 20th. Too bad it's after this workshop. And the third one is I would like to provide more like a community update, try to describe the PCC Rda test. At the end, I just want to say welcome everyone to participate in this test and the implementation. Next one. So first I want to share with you is encourage everyone go to the Rda Steering Committee website. And recently we posted 4 new documents. The first one is the collection model in Rda. This is a kind of one of the Rda objective is try to expand the Rda use in the archive and museum community, which is, we think is really important to integrate the 2 communities. The second and third one focus on expression. And third one is finally, we can see the 3R project final report is really give you a snapshot of all the changes. Next one. The other one I want to mention about Rda Steering Committee just established 4 new working groups. And you can see the term is from this year to next year. The first one focus on extent, and this has been issues and being voiced in the community. So you can see all the new working groups I see try to respond to some of the concern issues from the community. And that's why we set up this working groups is really try to investigate and also the proposal, including recommendation. The second one is the official language working group. As you can see, the concept of official language for corporate body in Rda has been an issue. The third one is, I think maybe from CO community, we can really respond to it, resonate with this issue is examine the concept, place, and jurisdiction in talking about corporate body and their associate definition instruction in Rda. The fourth one is religion in the Rda working group. This is the one our colleague from Israel, they draft this report. It's called Western and Christian Bias in the 3R Toolkit. I think this is being discussed by the CTP before. When you look at the original Rda Toolkit, it's the most example only for Christianity. So this working will try to expand the non-Christian coverage in Rda. And I serve on this working group. I really want to work with my CO colleagues, try to address issue for Buddhism and Taoism, etc. Next one, please. As ISC representative on the MARC and Rda working group, I also work closely with my colleagues from Europe. And you can see these 3 new proposals being approved by the MARC Advisory Committee just recently, a few months ago. And as you can see, the first one for data provenance is also very important one in the new Rda. And also this is address the European or German community, the kind of email. However, the example instruction will be helpful for a lot of non-English community. And the second one and third one, you can see how try to really more instruction on representative expression. The third one is also very exciting to see this being the scale for visual materials being included. Next one. When I prepared for this presentation, I talked to the RDA Technical Team Liaison Officer, Damien, and I really want to make sure because he keep on talking about he will work on the RDA and different mapping. So I just want to let you know, this is kind of information I received from him. The RDA Technical Working Group will be working on RDA and different mapping. And the mapping has a target date of December 2022. We're all excited about it. Next one. So now let me talk about official RDA toolkit. As I mentioned earlier, the next release, the March release will happen next week. So the old example I present today still have to use in the current one is July 2021 release. But over here, I really want somehow we provide some sort of context. As you can see, official RDA toolkit, I would say is an international standard with options which may be governed by policy statement or application provided by cataloging agency. So over here, I just want to let you know, RDA is really have both global and local consideration. So I think it's quite comply with that kind of postmodern term called globalization. It's a kind of really support diversity. On the other hand, I also want to emphasize RDA supports linked data. As you can see, RDA toolkit based on the IFLA LRM is entity relationship model. The entity are described using elements. And when you're using the RDA toolkit, you can see the entity elements of vocabulary guidance and instruction to support this. And also for RDA registry is RDA RDF with the linked data and semantic web representation of the elements, and they are open access. We're also working on how to enhance toolkit, but this is more like a long-term plans. We really want to see the toolkit to support application profiles or specialized communities. We also want to develop a generic mapping tool, visual browser, even though they are long-term tools. It won't happen this year or next year, but definitely we're working on it. Next one. So if you ever try to, use the official, the new RDA toolkit, so you can see this is the homepage. And you can see on the top level, it's really the profile feature are in the dark blue bar. The first one, of course, you can click on original toolkit to go to the original one and to still use it. The second one is the help. This is really helpful. For example, on you can see the screenshot, I click that question mark. Then, for example, mine still using NYU login, but I can personalize my RDA toolkit. You can follow that instruction, just click there and follow instruction to really change the interface. The third one, even though they say English, actually is language of text and or sight. So over here, you say English, actually so far there's 4 languages available. I think Finnish and French and Norwegian. So, and hopefully we have more languages available there. And also you can see, you can submit your feedback through the online form where you click there. For the content tab, you can see the second level is with the entity guidance, policies, and resources. And as you can see, we don't have table of contents anymore. Everything will just, you can just highlight the entity, the element, and you will see you can see the screenshot there. You can click the link of that resource instruction. And also you still can see how that map to the original toolkit citation number. So they're still available there. Next one, please. So entities, you can see it's based on the IFLA LRM. On the right-hand side, you can see all the empty list there that was that drop-down menu there, the tab key. So each entity has its own page, its separate page. Also, at the bottom of each page, actually you can see the screenshot here. The elements, you can click both attribute elements or relationship elements. If you click on relationship elements, the radio button, You can click the drop-down menu and try to refine your search. Next one, please. And also each element page, you can see the structure. As always, very consistently to see name of element, definition scope, pre-recording, it means to make sure you really this is the right one for you. So these elements may refer to, so you know the condition. And recording, the full recording method always there doesn't mean they, even though not applicable, but information is right there. Related elements as applicable, and also you can see broader, narrow, and inverse elements. Next one, please. Guidance. Under the guidance, this is a kind of topical approach. You will see that they are separate from the instructions, so very different from the original toolkit. And they are basically for background information, new concepts, instruction that may apply more than one element. And actually, if you go to the entity page, you can see the go to entity manifestation recording. You can see this one, describing manifestation actually linked, cross-linked to the guidance resource description. So they are well interconnected. Next one, please. For example, there's another really important one under the guidance. It's called entity boundaries. This is something I can just simply summarize with one sentence. This is really helpful for catalogers or metadata librarian to determine if a description of a new Rda entity is required. And there are two types of a boundary. The one called absolute boundary is something more like reflect a physical word like an item, manifestation, person, place, and time span. Another one called relative boundary. And this one really emphasizes determined by bibliographic and cultural conventions. For example, work is a very abstract concept. So it's no absolute boundary. So that's why how to define if it's new work is really determined by bibliographic and cultural convention. On the other hand, you can see example here. Some element value when the difference may or may not require a new entity description. For example, data of manufacturer, it doesn't really matter. Next one, please. So you also can see the entity boundary under specific entity. So over here, you can see this is a list of instruction, the boundary of a specific entity. Next one, please. So when we talk about work, the work entity boundary, obviously I want to divide into two categories. One is more like generally speaking work, or you can say try to have contrast with the second category, diachronic work. So the first category is, we tend to really try to determine based on if it's significant difference in, for example, the subject. It could be related agent of the work. It could be the elements of expression, whose the content differ from another realization of the work, etc. And this also can see the change in the genre form, etc. And you can see expression is the aggregates for the aggregating expression. So you can see this kind of instruction there to provide the data. On the other hand, if you look at the instruction for diachronic work, and there's something else, for example, the frequency change, ISSN change, even the carrier type change, and also how that work embodiment over time, this kind of thing also to be considered. Next slide, please. So if you look at these 3 bullet points, for the serious catalog, it's not strange to you is when we decide if it's a major title change. So you can see for the language and script divided into words, you can see that difference. For example, the second point is talking about the first 5 words, and that's a kind of standard concept practice, only kind of changing in meaning or indication of different subject. And also you can see if something, the preferred title with the copy body change, that's also become a major change. Next one, please. So over here, as I mentioned earlier, you can see that tab for entity guidance. The other two is policy and also resources. So over here, we are moving to more like a community guidance and resources. So I just want to let you know what's inside the RDA, what's outside the RDA. Inside the RDA, you do see the policy statements. And that's a kind of decision for a cataloging agency or community. For example, LCPCC or the OLAC community or music library association, and that's called PS. You also can see the community resources is more community specific guidance, not in above. But so far, we actually, because it's still in the early stage of implementation, so far you will still see a lot of community resources still for ongoing American legacy instruction. We still want to provide the information there so people can still look into it because that related to abbreviation, capitalism, etc. They also the category for documents is user-created documentation. They can be used privately or shared locally or globally. So what's outside RDA? The one actually under the guidance, you will see application profile, but actually you can really use it outside RDA as, for example, Library of Congress using application profile to do a lot of high-level analysis before creating the metadata guidance documentation. So over here, outside the RDAs, as you can see, Paul Frank just announced recently with the metadata guidance documentation, but they are really posted on the LC website. However, they are very helpful for you do the daily work because they provide very specific instruction, especially tied to LCPCC, community shared data, and they also provide examples both in Mark and Bib Frame. Next, please. So policies, so far you only see 3 policies being posted there, and some of them actually really need to be updated. So you're going to see next week. So currently we only have 3 PS posted in draft form, and they are British Library, LCPCC, and Music Library Association. And under each library, you can see entity guidance, community resources. On the other hand, if you go to each entity element page, so left-hand side, you will see, yes, that's the RDA, base RDA information there, but actually on the right-hand side, you will see there's a PS set, that kind of, selection menu, drop-down menu. So actually you can click there. For example, this is the great example here. I just captured this screenshot is under work. You will see the policy statement there, give you some sort of snapshot. Oh, we haven't seen anything coming from British Library or Music Library Association. However, under LCPCC PS, there are 33 related PS for you to select. Next one, please. So this is one of the topics been discussed at the RDA Steering Committee recently. And this you can see on the left-hand side is the RDA toolkit with entity work and create a corporate body of work. But you can see corresponding LCPCC PS just on its right-hand side, and they are really displayed side by side, which I think really, really helpful for catalog. Just try to really, use this together. And also you can see LCPCC PS. This one, if someone really familiar with the original RDA, I should have the pop quiz or something. It's coming from original RDA 19.2.1.1.1. With that kind of detailed instruction, we carry over from ACR to LCRI, that kind of thing. Okay, next one, please. Resources. This area is still pretty new. I would say it's new and to be decided. This is really a new topic. On the other hand, I think this will mean a lot to the CO community because it's really community-specific resources. And this is the area once we have more detailed instruction from IC, and this is the one I really want to engage with my CO colleague and think about kind of thing we can post some of the CJK best practice there. Next one, please. Application profile. This under the guidance, and as I mentioned earlier, this actually some of the national cataloging institution or agency try to use the application profile as more like a high-level analysis, try to map RDA entity, this should be applied, applicable, repeatable, etc. This kind of thing really helpful for a national cataloging agency to use, but also can use by each one of us. For example, you would want to do a special project at your institution, but it's not required. And so over here, I just want to simply provide information here, and that you can just look into it, would be helpful. As you can see, minimum description or something called effective and the coherent description, all the information here, they are pretty helpful. Next slide, please. Over here, I still want to emphasize a key point here. The application profile is also a very good tool if you really want to implement linked data, because RDA registry provide IRI for every single RDA entity, element, vocabulary encoding schema, and vocabulary term. So that right there, if you want to implement your linked data project, and register IRI may be using application profile for linked data created in the RDF schema. Next one, please. So also under the guidance, there's also called Rda Implementation Scenarios. Over here, you can see, to give you a snapshot. Scenario A is if you want to implement something related to linked data, linked open data, but also apply to scenario C is simply for bibliographic authority data. So I just want to let you know over here, provide option scenario for you to think about. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm trying to watch my time. I'm sorry. Maybe I only have 5 more minutes. So I'm also want to provide a community update is about PCC RDA test. Next slide, please. So I just want to let you know PCC Policy Committee already set up PCC RDA Communication Committee, and also you probably see announcement with the feedback form and the tracking spreadsheet, then you don't have to submit a duplicate comment, okay? And also the task force being established to test the official RDA toolkit, as you can see the charge just last month. And so what's going to be, what to test is including official RDA toolkit, PS, and also very important is for the metadata guidance documentation. And as Paul Frank announced earlier, PCC won't implement even using this documentation, but won't implement before October 2020 this year. Next slide, please. So over here, I just want to provide 2 examples. The first example is, first thing I want to know if this is really a major change requiring a new serial work, a new description. So you can see under the official RDA toolkit, you can go to the entity, try to find information. You can also go to the guidance there to see related guidance documents. And also you can see under LCPC PS, you will see the following instruction for entity boundary condition. For the metadata guidance documentation, you will see 2 related documents. One is for serial work and integrating work decision. Another one is relation WAMI, as you know, the WAM block. Next one, please. So in addition to that, actually, generally speaking, we still have some sort of LCPCC practice, think about Mark, 245 to 246, and Council Cataloging Manual Module 16.2. You can find the information there as well. Next slide, please. So over here, I want to provide example to you is when I try to do the serial modeling and mapping Bib Frame and Mark 780-785 field. So the left-hand side in the Mark, I would say, oh, Title A in 245 is continued in part by Title B. Actually, in Mark is 785-01, the second indicate one. And map to the Bib Frame ontology will be, you can see Title A continuing in part by B with the Bib Frame ontology. The second example, this is the Title A is really absorbed in part by Title B in 785 field, second indicate 5. But I couldn't find any Bib Frame ontology for that specific relationship. So I could find RDA property is absorbed in part by, and this is according to PCC guideline, is for unconstrained property. Next slide, please. So second example, of course, I need to provide example in CJK language and script, and this is the one we are working on the blueprint serial. This is one of the example. You can see in Mark 245, and then 775 is try to link into the reproduction. I mean, actually, this is a try to link to the original. So you can see on Bib Frame property ontology, you can see all the linking there and also point to reproduction of. Next slide, please. So this, I want to conclude my presentation here. I think it's 3:31. I try to meet in 30 minutes. Is welcome everyone to participate in PCC RDA test. Please provide your feedback concerning official RDA toolkit, LCPCC PS, and metadata guidance document. As I mentioned earlier, RDA toolkit is a global standard that think globally and act locally. Next slide will be really talking about or consult several recent RDA presentation, and they are really helpful for me. And last slide, next one, is you can also want to know more about toolkits through this free YouTube recording there. Thank you, everyone.
Shelley is the department head of the content support services at UC Davis Library. For the past 8 years, Shelley has been involved in numerous linked data efforts. She was a primary member of UC Davis BibFlow project and participated in the OCOC's linked data project Passage. She co-convened the PCC Council Bib Frame Task Group and just completed her 2-year term serving on OCOC Shared Entity Management Infrastructure Advisory Group. Currently, Shelley serves as the coordinator of the Linked Data Working Group for the Ex-Libris users community and is a member of the Sheer Vde National Bibliographies Working Group. In her spare time, she works with a group of Chinese American librarians to diversify information in Wikidata by creating and enhancing Wikidata items associated with Chinese people and culture. Please join me in welcoming Shelley. Please go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you for the introduction. And if there's a time at the end, I probably will do a sort of poll from everywhere, just in case we have time. And so what I'm going to do right now is in the chat, I'm sending you the poll link. So when it's time to do the poll, if we have time, we will do it. But at least you have link now. And thank you for the introduction. And I know we have 30 minutes, so I probably will go through some slides very quickly and hopefully to leave enough time at the end to have some in-depth discussing. So, okay, slideshow. Do you see my slideshow or do you see the presenters show?
I think it's presenters.
Okay, so if I change to, how about now?
Good.
Okay. But then with this, I cannot move. Okay, did. For this next 25 minutes, hopefully I will just cover 3 sort of major areas. First is about linked data adoption, as well as the current development. And then 5 top trends from my own sort of thinking, as well as some possible impact on CJK cataloging. So for the linked data adoption and also current development, I borrowed most of the information from Karen. Many of you probably know her. She was a wonderful colleague and retired recently from OCLC. And for past almost 8 years, she did 3 linked data survey internationally. And here is sort of give you an overview of 3 survey participants. A total of 3 start from 2014 through the 2018. 143 institutions replied to her survey questions. And out of that, I picked up a few topics which I think might be interesting to you. One is out of this 140 some respondents, it represents 23 countries. So no surprising, most of the people responded are from the United States, but at least as you can tell, there's 23 at least countries are represented on those survey results. And then by the institution, again, I guess there's no surprising, research library and the national libraries are the biggest two groups who responded to survey because they're the one have done or are doing most of linked data activity. But what was a sort of a good sign, it didn't happen in first two survey is at least there is some service provider represented in the last survey, which took place in 2018. Next thing in her survey was looking at what type of vocabulary actually is used in the comparison from 2015 to 2018. Couple of trends, you can tell the yellow bar is the 2018, the orangish bar is 2015. So three type of vocabulary are gained more momentum. One is local vocabulary, and the other one is Bib Frame. And then next one is schema.org, which is used by major search engines like Yahoo, Google, and Bing, and so on. So that gives you a quick overview of linked data adoption, but at least to give you a sort of a sense what is happening up to 2018. So with current development, I list a few, and I think many of those you already know. And I'm not going to talk about Bib Frame because Sally is going to spend, she will tell you more and better than what I can. But a few ones I have been involved, I thought may be interesting for you to know. And I assume most of you have heard OCLC shared entity management infrastructure. And that is a 2-year grant project and focus on looking at setting up a production where catalogers can create, maintain, and modify the linked data description for people's and creative works. Those are the two initial focus. And then currently in that database, there is already millions of descriptions come from WordCat, VF, and Wikidata. And then if you are PCC member, or even if you're not PCC member, you probably have heard this project called Linked Data for Production, short by LD4P. The project started in 2016 and it went through several phases and currently is phase 3. If you have been trying the tools the project created, and that tool is called Sonopia. And I think Naomi told me many of you probably already either used it or practiced or explored Sonopia. So this may not be unfamiliar to you. So next one, you probably heard lots of time, and there's so many presentations about this initiative, which is called the Sheer Vde Initiative. Basically, this is sort of community-driven project, but it was coordinated by the vendor called Castellini. Currently, there is 22 research libraries participated, and they have so many working groups working on different data model and looking at how to convert MARC records and also provide feedback on what discovery is needed for native linked data. So if you're interested, they do have a very nice website laid out a lot of activities and also the current development. Last two I just want to talk about is more vendor related. Ex Libris, ARMA, and Primo. And again, most of research library, if I understood correctly, are using Ex Libris ARMA, and some of you probably use Primo as well. So currently in this IRS system, you could export your MARC record as linked data. And Ex Libris supply the URIs based on authority control happen within the ARMA system itself. And it's also, I know that UPenn has been looking at how to connect ARMA with Sonopia, meaning if they use Sonopia, they will be able to push the record or Bib Frame description from Sonopia into ARMA and vice versa. So there is some sort of integration happening between ARMA and Sonopia. And I know Ex Libris has been working with our group, which Naomi mentioned. I'm coordinating the linked data group for Ex Libris user to see what type of integration is also useful for library community. Last one is Ebsco Folio. And if you participated in the core presentation last week, by the way, there's many very wonderful presentation about linked data presented in core week. I don't know if anybody have a link, please put into the chat. And so if you haven't been able to listening to the live presentation, you may want to review the recordings, and they're wonderful. There's some talk about linked data model, and there's some talk about linked data workflow. So it's a great presentations. So in terms of Folio, even though you really cannot save linked data into Folio, but Folio is flexible enough, can accommodate different type of data formats. As a result, Cornell, which is very active in linked data, has moved to Folio last year, and Stanford, the other major linked data player, is going to migrate to Folio soon as well. So that's the current development. And the next, I want to just share 5 top trends based on my experience, and I came up with those trends. Hopefully you will agree with me. First one, Bib Frame is definitely gaining momentum, and there's more and more people are looking into it, how to actually incorporate into the workflow. But I just want to remind you, MARC is not died yet. The reason for that is MARC was built for a very complex ecosystem. There's so many services are reliant on the MARC as a communication, sort of using the records. As a result, I think it will take time to eventually replace MARC. And this is just the diagram we used to show how complicated moving from a MARC to linked data. Just look at internally, what are the things that are connected to our integrating system, which is using MARC record. Next trend, which again, hopefully you agree with me, and I know many people still not necessarily think link Wikidata or Wikipedia is important resources, but I have to say Wikidata is part of library linked data landscape. For past year or so, I have seen so many presentations about different libraries are using Wikidata or work with Wikidata. So I do think Wikidata is an important part of linked data landscape for the library community. And then the third trend, for past many years, we were pretty much focused on how to create a linked data, what ontology should we use, and what tools may be necessary. But I think we are probably still working on those, but we also started looking at workflow integration as well as interoperability, because that's where we should go. We are not just for creation, we are for sharing and reuse. So it is very important to think about integration and interoperability as a part of linked data planning. Number 4, you have heard library reference model, you heard the Bib Frame model, you heard the Sheer Vde model and the OCLC model. There is so many models, but good news is at least those organizations have been working together, and I have seen this now it's create stronger relationship, and there's some planned mapping is going to happen to make sure we can truly reuse each other's data without too much of manual sort of intervention. Last one, as I mentioned, some vendors are already started providing linked data services, and I also think more people are buying in terms of looking at the linked data and consider it as a potential replacement of current MARC format. So as more people are involved and as more vendors are providing service, I do think we may reach the tipping point, and we can really start thinking about implementing linked data. Okay, for next few minutes, let me try to very quickly talk about my view of how this linked data may impact CJK cataloging or cataloging in general. So let me start with cataloging in general. And I do see the linked data brings a very big change to our cataloging practice in at least the following 4 ways. One, we used to be record-based cataloging, and I think we are shifting to entity-based cataloging. For example, instead of creating the authority record for people, we'll say we create a person entity. And instead of a geographic name, we're saying, okay, we'll create an entity for a geographic location. So basically, you make them can really stand alone and so on. So that's the first shift. And the second, I think, is we have been spent so much time describing the resources, like, and I do think the important part of work, that is still important, but also most importantly, we also need to start thinking about how we as a catalog thinking about linking resource or linking entities and to help patrons, help users to find the information more easily. And the third, and we call the authority control, because authority control means your strength has to be exactly matched. And I think that need to be shifted to identity management. So text strength still probably important, but I think the identifier is the most important in terms of matching and of finding additional information or finding additional resources, because that type of work can be done by machine as well if we have identifier. And the fourth one, I think this should be very exciting. And we, as a cataloging or as a catalogers, we used to be just creating record. And I feel we are now probably moving more into the knowledge manager, because again, when you try to linking things to different resources or different places, we're really applying our knowledge, not only just cataloging, but maybe our cultural heritage knowledge, or maybe our subject knowledge. Basically, we are making some provide richer context information to our user instead of just describing what resource is. So I think this is very exciting. Now I'm going to move to my thinking of how does my impact CJK cataloging by posting 3 questions. And after each question, I will have a poll. Looks like I do have time. So sorry. Okay, first question. Thinking about we are focused on identifier and focus on linking and so on. How important it is to create a unique text string in linked data environment. I'm talking about authority control here. So before I answer that question, I just want to show you a couple of examples. First one, since I'm native Chinese speaker and I'm more comfortable to present examples in Chinese. So, but I'm sure maybe similar situation can happen in Japanese and Korean, but again, I don't have knowledge, so I don't want to assume that's the same issue there. So looking at this author, her Chinese name is Bai Ling, but it looks like those 2 characters up here, but the romanization is this way. And then we have another author has the exact same normalization, but totally different Chinese character, same last name, but different first name. And it happened that both have a same birth year. So in order to create authority record to differentiate them, looks like catalogers for first one that put year, for second one that put months. That is how to differentiate them. So in the romanization, they look same, but in Chinese character, they are different. So if we are looking at identity management, you probably will not worry about the romanization is the same. Instead, you will use other characteristics of this individual to differentiate them. Birthday, birth year definitely is one, and the notable work probably is another one, but also importantly, how the name is appeared in characters. That will be a major difference as well. So next thing to think about is if we are still relying on unique text string, especially romanized text string, we really cannot reuse the information created by our colleagues around the world. For example, this is the author Cao Xueqing, and when it's romanized in the United States, this is how we create that unique string for him. And then this is what is created by French libraries and a bunch of other libraries, as you can tell. We really cannot share those information if we still thinking about using unique text string. But if we think about using the identifier, we can have a different identifier pointing to the same person, but have a different labels. So with that, I just want to show possible models, and hopefully some of you have tried or used the Wikidata, which support multilingual inputs and so on. So one of very useful feature is when you put in somebody's name, you specify what languages it is, and in that language, what label it looks like. So with that information, you don't have to identify which one is authorized, the authority access point. But with those information in this granular level, you can display whichever way you want. You can display it if you choose as English, then the romanized form appears. Or if you choose display as Chinese, then the Chinese characters show, even though you notice it's the same ID. Or if you prefer, you can display them as Korean. So with that, now I'm going to do the poll. I already have this link in the chat. If you take that link and you can go to this question and then answer those questions. Again, this is a completely voluntary. If you're not want to do it, it's totally okay. So I'm just going to stay probably for a minute to see how we feel. Okay, I think the results probably is very reasonable, and because there's a many, whatever changes we want to make will depend on what tools we may be able to use. Without tool, it's really not good idea to change practice, because that will definitely probably have a negative impact on our user. Thank you for participation. So move to the next possible, next questions I want to pose is, how necessary it is that romanization of non-Latin scripts, which can be Chinese, Japanese, Korean, must follow LA, LC romanization tables. I know people can argue romanization is still necessary because we want to use it for assigning contact number, or we want to use it to help people to pronounce it, on and on. So I'm not just saying the romanization isn't important, but my question is it necessary to follow the romanization tables? I just want to demonstrate my point. I want to just show one example. So in Chinese romanization, and when we have a geographic feature or geographic name and so on, and I think that's the area can be challenged. So this particular place I picked up is called Changjiang Liuyu. This map basically show you the region. And I did a quick search in OCLC. So you see those words here, those 4 words here, and but being romanized as each character is romanized as a single word. So it's like a 4 separate characters here. And then you also see somebody put first 2 characters, Chanjiang together, and then Liuyu separate. And then third one, put first 2 characters together and the last 2 characters together. So the reason for that is I think the romanization rules sometimes can be complicated, and it could be because people don't know how to apply it. If a rule is too complicated to apply it correctly, then it definitely impacts how people funding the resources and how even catalog fund the exact record in OCLC. So with that, I have second poll for you to do. If your website is still open, you should be able just to go to that second one. But just stay for a minute to see if people need time to switch back to the website to find this question. Okay, thank you for responding. And again, I'm not trying to say which way is right or wrong. I'm just trying to pose the question for you, for CJK community to think about it. Next question, would it be useful exploring how to use linked data created by our colleagues in other countries, such as China, Japan, and South Korea? So to help you to think about this, I'm just going to show you a couple examples. Currently, at least linked data is published from those countries. Shanghai Public Library, I think they have done wonderful work related to publishing their data in linked data format. By the way, Shanghai Public Library is a very active member in Folio community. So they have had 9 different types of data published in the linked data, which are showing here. Sorry, they're in Chinese, but basically they include a personal name and even last name, or the major historical event, as well as a geographic name, organization name, and a couple of other things, which I think wasn't very, not something I'm actually familiar with, but I took a look at it. It was very interesting. So those linked data, not only we as a human being can look at it, they provide a Sparkle query endpoint. They also provide API, which means you can basically query the data using machine query, not necessarily you as a human need to do the work. So it's a very rich linked data source. And next one is from Japan National Library, National Diet Library, and there have been published their authority data in linked data format almost a decade ago, in 2012, and the including name and tropical name as well as genre. And so they use Dublin core and the use of RDA, and as well as SCOS. SCOS is more for subject. And the National Library of Korea, they also publish their data as linked data. In addition to consider the traditional like authority data, they also publish the bibliographic data as linked data. I think there are a lot of rich linked data out there. If we can rethink about our practice related to Romanization or authority, access point, and so on, we may be able to increase the reuse of the data created by our colleagues around the world. So last poll. Same website, and should come up with this question. Thank you. Looks like, at least according to the poll, you think it's useful to explore. Maybe that's something CJK community can do it together and increase your partnership with colleagues in those countries to see how we can find some collaboration and maybe even some project doing together. With that, I do think linked data brings opportunity for us to reimagine and re-engineer our own future. And it's important for you to feel you are part of, at least important for me to feel I'm part of history and making history. And so please be active if you have time. And thank you so much for your time.
Our first speaker is Sally Mccallum. Sally is Chief of the Network Development and MARC Standards Office at the Library of Congress. Her office maintains a MARC format, has spearheaded the development of the Bibliographic Framework Initiative, Bib Frame, and is also engaged in XML and RDF representations of other widely used bibliographic standards. The Library of Congress Linked Data Service and pilot project using the Bib Frame ontology are primary ongoing projects in her office. Please join me in welcoming Sally. Oh, Sally, you're muted.
I know. Figured that out. Okay, thank you. I'm on mute now, and good day. And thank you very much for inviting me to present at your Bib Frame update project update. Let's go to the first slide. Our goal for 2022 is what we call Bib Frame 100. Bib Frame 100 means going from approximately 100 catalogers who were in our Bib Frame pilot, who were working 2 days a week in that pilot program and in the Bib Frame system, and going to approximately 350 catalogers working 5 days a week in production. The 100 catalogers were also having to key their records into the MARC system in addition to in the Bib Frame system. And when we go to the larger number of catalogers days a week, they will only be doing Bib Frame is what our plan is, our goal is. We expect to have around 80 to 90% success in having all the catalogers transfer because and we're working very hard on the cataloging copy that we get from foreign vendors, from our acquisition system, from all sorts of sources, which will come into the Library of Congress in MARC. It will be converted to Bib Frame and be usable then by the catalogers. This, what we call initial bibliographic control records, or IBCs. But there are many interdependencies in the community, and one of them is CONSER, for instance, where we actually do the work in OCLC. So we don't think everyone can get into the Bib Frame system, do all their work in the Bib Frame system. Okay, let's go to the next one. But we needed, in order to be able to do Bib Frame 100, starting sometime last year, we put down a program that said, one, we needed a more robust system, and that we have completed that. We moved from an on-site computers to the cloud. We updated the version of the platform that we used for the Bib Frame system, and we had two parts that the Bib Frame system was made up of 2 parts, and we merged those and updated that so that the ID part and the Bib Frame database part were then integrated, and it's much easier to maintain. We needed a new editor. We had, in the middle of last year, we started using Marva, and we have been constantly refining it. Marva is the name of the new editor, and we've been constantly refining it. And so we we finally took down the old editor. And then we need Bib Frame To Mark conversions. That part is under development. And let's go to the next slide. So why Bib Frame To Mark? Since once we're in Bib Frame, why not just stay there? Well, as we know, there are legacy systems within our subsystems, in particular, within our main systems that are MARC-based. I mean, our acquisition system may be, our checkout system may be. There are all sorts of pieces that have been built into our old ILS that are still MARC-based. And because, well, our ILS at the Library of Congress is over 20 years old. And in 20 years, you build a whole lot of little subsystems that are MARC-based. MARC records will be needed for copy cataloging. So we will be needing to move those records back and forth. We have cooperative programs with library partners that these partners may not be able to use Bib Frame. For us to continue to work with them, we need to be able to put our data into MARC, from Bib Frame into MARC, and then we can keep our cooperative program going. And then obviously if the Library of Congress is inputting its records into Bib Frame and it wants to share with the larger library community, the international library community, we've got to be able to turn it into MARC for our MARC colleagues. So we did MARC to Bib Frame conversions in 2012. In 2020, we published our first Bib Frame to MARC. The two conversions are essentially locked together now, so that everything is more difficult than it was before, but we are continuing to refine and improve, and that will go on for the rest of this year. Let's go to the next one. So what these conversions brought to light are several things. And one is that there are many unused and no longer used elements in MARC. And our own database at the Library of Congress, a lot of those unused elements are sitting around. Some institutions may have, when something was no longer used, they may have converted it to a more recent form of that element, but we did not at the Library of Congress. And so we have many of these elements that just hang around, and they may or may not be equally indexed with their later versions of them. We have different, there are different, well, let me say, we need to reconcile element duplication. There is a lot of duplication in MARC, and when we started converting from MARC to Bib Frame, we try to dedupe that. But then when we try to make a Bib Frame to MARC conversion, MARC is expecting all sorts of different elements, some elements to go into all sorts of different places. And unfortunately, the ILSs out there, the systems out there, some of them depend on seeing that data in one place, and some of them want to see that data in another place. And so we have struggled, frankly, with trying to either put it in all the places or what to do, or trying to figure out which is the most likely place that people are still using that data. But we also wanted to, what it also surfaced is, do we need so much romanization? Go to the next. So let's look at romanization. Romanization before MARC, before 1968, was catalog cards. We had romanization on our catalog cards, but we had non-Latin scripts also. I can remember when I very first came to the library, they were dismantling it, but we had our government printing office had these printing machines that could do all sorts of different scripts installed in a room at the Library of Congress. So our access points were Romanized and our added entries were Romanized. The titles were in the script and also Romanized. The descriptions used non-Latin, however, when needed, and they did not Romanize much of anything. And you can see that in this record here. You'll note that the title page transcription is in the original script. The contents note is in the original script. And but the author and the author name and the editor name are Romanized as access points, but they're also, the author name can be found in the title page transcription in the original script. The next one, next slide. So bound with title, if we had a link to another title, we did it in the original script. In the next one. Here's a Russian example or a Cyrillic example. The head of title note is in the original script, but note that the name in the added entry is transliterated because we did transliterate the access points. Again, we had the title title transliterated is on the record, and it's also in the original script on the record. And the next one, last one of these examples, a series statement that is, we also put those in the original script, even the series. Let's go to the next one. So when Mark started, we started our Mark cataloging, 1968 forward. At that time, the support for character sets in computers in the late 1960s was not anything like what we imagined, what we have today. But a lot of computing went on with just uppercase Latin characters, but we were beginning to have lowercase. So the Mark community, actually, Henriette Avram, who was a computer specialist when she came to the library and learned about librarianship at the library, she worked with the Computing Association for Computing Machinery and developed developing the basic Latin character set with diacritics and with many more diacritics and with upper and lower case. Because of the Latin only limitation, however, LC had to Romanize everything. So whereas before we had these cards that you just saw with the original scripts, now we had to Romanize everything, and to be able to print cards. So there was this huge increase in Romanization, and I don't think we've gotten past that yet. In the 70s and 80s, there was a slow development of non-Latin character scripts. They were called 96 character sets, and they were very difficult to implement. So there were people in the computing industry who by the 1990s had formulated how they would do Unicode and had the very first of the Unicode publications. So that's all scripts in one very large set. And that really opened the door to being able to incorporate that into Mark and into various systems. Next slide. So by 2000, the Mark systems that had been implemented in the library community were pre-Unicode character sets. There was Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Hebrew, Arabic, then new data structures started developing, and they required the use of Unicode. XML and RDF both did. And so we developed Mark XML so that we could use Unicode and with Mark data. And we then have been developing Bib Frame in the RDF data structure. So the opportunity to reduce Romanization and to restart recording more of the description in non-Latin was possible. Next. If you come from if you do non-Latin from the CJK community, you are familiar with the Mark conventions for non-Latin script. And one of them is Model A, which is used for bibliographic records. And that's where we put all of the non-Latin in the 880s. And then we reserve the regular fields only for Latin script. And Model B, which is used for authority records. And there we actually we do not use the 880, and we put Latin and non-Latin both in the regular fields. However, a lot of systems are not using the authority records with their bibliographic records. And so let's go on to the next slide. But and so they're not able to, as a result, they've built their system so that they're not able to put the non-Latin in the regular fields. Though we've had this mixture of techniques for a long time. And I also want to note that this business of using the 880s and putting the Latin only in the regular fields is a community convention. It's not something that Mark makes us do, which is what we quite often blame, who we quite often blame for things. Okay. So there was recognition that Romanization is costly in time and difficult to make consistent. We find that at the Library of Congress, where we get a lot of initial bibliographic control records from our offices in other countries, in Asia and in Africa, and the people do the Romanization as best they can, but it's not ALA Romanization always. And so in 2007, there was an excellent non-English access report done by a task force that really laid out the whole landscape, because they were trying at that time already to sort of see, should we be changing what we're doing? And in 2009, there was an ELEX task force that also did a very nice report. Both of them concluding that we still need a fair amount of Romanization because we had built our systems. Our systems still couldn't really act properly with the non-Latin script in the records. LC did a study in 2018 then of that we examined using the non-Latin issues in Mark. And we began looking at the impact of less Romanization, what it would be on our catalogs. Let's go to the next one. Next slide. So that kicked it off. And as a result, in the Bib Frame work, we've been looking at at going back to some of the pre-Mark conventions. Access points romanized in bibliographic descriptions. We are not doing that. Main entry, added entries in romanized form in bibliographic descriptions with links to the original script, which is in the authority record. And one might note that even if the main entry, let's say the author's name is romanized, it will quite often be in the bibliographic description in the title page transcription. There will be the original script version of that name. The title will be recorded in script and also romanized. And we found that the primary imprint statement, and I say primary because our records have more than one imprint statement quite often, but the primary one we want to record both in the script of the item and also romanized. And I note that the 008, which has coded information about the form of publication and about the place of publication and the publisher, it will still, and the country of publication, will still be in the records, in the Bib Frame records, but they are not at the same level as the imprint statement. And so far, we have not been able to say that we do not need the imprint statement. We don't need it not romanized. In our descriptions, though, we want to use non-Latin every place that unless it's absolutely needed, with no romanization, cutting down on the amount of romanization. We have records that have a whole table of contents romanized, and that's a lot of romanization and a lot of time for the catalogers. And but we're in the process right now of adjusting our Bib Frame editor, adjusting our conversions to, in fact, meet these requirements of access point, imprint. Okay. So can we move to limited romanization? The advantages are, of course, saving time. We can focus on being more consistent with our limited romanization, whereas we have found within Library of Congress, at least, that there is a lot of inconsistency of the Romanized text, partly coming from the fact that it's not just that every cataloger might have a slightly different idea of what the Romanization should be, but many of our records come from our offices in India or other places, Africa, Southeast Asia. The end users, we feel, are better served by original script, as long as they can read the record, they can understand the record better. The impacts, however, current systems limitations. Many systems are unable to handle non-Latin scripts at all, and other systems can handle them, but only in the 880. Because of that convention that we used, they built their systems that said no, they would not have non-Latin scripts in the regular fields, and we've got to get over that, but it will take time. There are other applications also that need romanization of data, which different organizations will have different pieces of their subsystem that maybe will need romanization. Go on to the next one. So I want to thank you for listening to me, and I want you to please consider these changes. And from what I heard from what Jolie was talking about, I think she's asking the same thing. Now on to a more exciting presentation on Marva by Yang Yang.
So our next speaker is Yang Yang Zhang. Yang Yang serves as a hybrid librarian in the Library of Congress, Asian and Middle Eastern Division, China section since 2021. Her major responsibilities reside in both acquisition and cataloging. Her acquisition role focuses on acquiring raw materials and serials, and cataloging role covers a wide range of subjects and formats, as well as serial cataloging. Prior to joining the Library of Congress, Yang Yang worked at Princeton University Library with East Asian Collection for about 7 years, and has accomplished many cataloging projects, as well as some rare book projects. Yang Yang spent most of her spare time with her 2 children and husband, and never loses enthusiasm of gardening. Okay, please welcome Yang Yang.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so hello, I'm Yang Yang Zhen from Library of Congress, Asian and Middle Eastern Division, China section. Today, I'm very excited and very much honored to have this opportunity to make a very quick demonstration how we use Marva to perform cataloging work. First thing first, what is Marva? Marva is the name of our new Bib Frame editor. It was launched last year in June 2021. It replaces what has been used since the beginning of the Bib Frame pilot in 2015. And in my opinion, one of the most wonderful thing about Marva is that it is actually created based on user input. And nowadays, it continues to be updated based on user input. Here, the user, I mean the catalogers, the pilot participants of this test project. So I must emphasize here, so Marva is a living product. It's not a final product. It is constantly evolving based on the feedbacks and the suggestions from the pilot participants. So after each major update, the version number will be updated. Our current version number is version 0.8.0. So Marva is a web-based editor. When we type in the URL, this is the first interface we have created a new record. So you can see the screen has 2 parts on the left and on the right. On the left, we have 6 options. I will show my records and everyone's records later during the live demo. So let's move on to the loading existing records. So here has the 3 steps instruction tell us how we use this load existing records. At least for me, most of the time, I do not catalog totally start from scratch with the totally blank records. I usually have a brief bibliographic records with, as Sally said, it's called the initial bibliographic control record. We have that. So this is the option I use most to load existing records to start from there. So next session is about setting. Currently, we have diacritics and authority, and look up these two options on the setting. And diacritic packs actually is newly added, I think, from last month. I think it's very helpful, and it is a very good example to show that Marva developing team listen to the feedbacks from past catalogers, because to some languages, they use much more diacritics and use more frequently than some other languages. So in this setting, you could customize your need based on your cataloging. Okay, so next is the help section. Currently, there are 6 topics under it, and each topic has a very short, quick video, very helpful. So when I just start to use Marva, I watch all of them, and I often go back to them to look for some answers if I need it. So this is the cataloging interface. When we click on create new records, it will be what it look like. So you can see screen has 3 parts, and we call them panels. On the left, we call it a select panel. You can see the list of text in it. And then in the middle is the biggest part. It is where we input the data to describe our source. It's called edit panel. So on the right, on the review panel, so it's very straightforward. When you type in the data, and you're gonna see those data reflected in the review panel. Okay, now let's take a look at Marva. So everyone can see my see Marva now, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so when we enter, it says create new records. When you see put my cursor to those on the left side to those options, they will show hotkeys. So you could choose use keyboard or could use your mouse. It's up to you. So my record is something I work on. Everyone's record it's currently available. It's all the pilot participants when they work on the record, and it's all stored here. Okay. So let's take a quick look at those settings. Authority looks up is only on and off button, not much information. Diacritics, if I screw to the bottom. So here has a field for you to add a new definition. So this is very helpful. You could define your diacritics. You could define the trigger key to use. Very convenient. Okay, help section. Help will have those videos. Very, very helpful, okay? Okay, so let's load existing record. So I will follow these steps. Go to BFDB, it means Bib Frame Database. I click on the link, and today I'm going to search by LCCN. It's a Library of Congress control number. Okay, it will bring up a record, a title. So if I move to the right side of the screen, here has the editor link, and I could click on this one, edit instance and work package. It will bring me back to Marva, and I'm going to load using monograph non-Latin. Okay, so here is the cataloging interface, okay? I want to also point out something like the option. Can you see the option on the top middle? So this is a function newly added last week. So this is what I said previously. Marva is the living product. So this is added based on people's suggestions. So you could see display layout has 3 options. You could choose compact. So you could see between those fields, there are no extra space. And the spreadsheet is in beta mode. It's still under development. People are testing to see what's going on. So very straightforward. It's look like a spreadsheet. And you're typing the data inside. But today I will go back to actual space. It's more viewer friendly, okay? Okay, so you can see each panel is all scrollable. And it's very different from the mark format we are used to, right? With the fixed field on top. And in the variant field, we have those number tags and the indicators, and we have the delimiters and the Bib frame description. We spell out everything like creator of the work. Here has person, if we use arrow, families, corporate body, jurisdiction, it spells out everything for us. So we could just choose, like for this one is the person. And this for this author, you could see a tiny little check mark here. If I move cursor, it says the head is valid. But however, we still need to check this author is the right, because as the previous presenter, they're talking about with the same Romanized form, they could be totally different people, right? So we are going to view entity. It will bring us to the name authority file. So we're gonna take a quick look, and this is a perfect match to our author. So we're gonna close this one. And mark related term, it says uncontrolled, but I'm going to type in and make it controlled. So author is in the mark related term. And Sally also talked about we are experimenting how to Romanize our access point. So what I'm showing today is just the current practice. It's not official, it's not a policy, but it's something we are doing now. And it is under very intense discussion how we are going to Romanize those fields and to what extent we are going to keep original scripts. But for currently, we are Romanize the titles, it's the big main access point, but we will live in the at instance level records with the original scripts with some exceptions. So the title, as I said, the Bib frame is spell out everything: work title, variant title, parallel title. So we just choose, and this is the title. Let's move on to, this is a geographic area code area. So for this, we have that to reflect to the mark record, the 043 field. So we are used to the 043 field to type in A dash something, A means Asia. And for China, it's double C means China. And the Shanghai is SCM. So I could use this way, and it could, I could click and add, or there's the other way. I could simply type in Shanghai and it works. Okay, so next I will move to the subject of this work. This is already a subject text string inside. And I'm going to check it. So you can see something is red, something is green. So red means something is wrong with it. We need to check that. But Marvin now is doing pretty good job to recognize each part of the subject heading to recognize which it belongs to. For example, if I click China, it recognizes it as geographic subdivisions. So if I do it completely blank, start from scratch, I could click this topic and type in textile industry, industry. So it will check against the LCSH to find a match. And you can see from the right side, here is the LCSH file. So this is a good one. I'm gonna keep this, type into dash, and I could click on geographic here, or I could type in $Z, indicating, oops, sorry, $Z, do it one more time, $Z, China. So you can see it becomes valid. So both ways works. So I think this gives us a little bit of flexibility to type in those subject headings and make a subject heading text string. Okay, let's move on to the instance level. So I want to show here why it's called the select panel, because we have so many data in the middle, in the edit panel, and it's too long to scroll down. So I choose to scroll down here on the left select panel to directly click on the title information to jump directly to the field I want. So as I said, our current practice is like we keep in the instance level record the original script. So for this one, I'm not going to Romanize that. We'll just keep it on the top. And those statement of responsibilities and addition is not needed. So I could just remove this field and leave it here. But the prohibition activity is a little bit different because we are talking about Bib Frame record to convert that to mark. So we are keeping two prohibition activities. The first one is used for 008 field, the publication place and the published date. So for this, I'm going to use China and the published date. But for the second prohibition activities, we do not want to Romanize it anymore. So I'm going to just live in the original languages here. And then the next will be the page numbers and the information, etc. It will stay in the instant level. So you could see, I think it's here on the review panel. It has those kind of information like portraits, illustration, and the bibliographic references, page number, dimension, etc. So we will keep them in the instance level. So, okay, this is a very short and brief demonstration how we do our cataloging work in Bib Frame. And this is the end of my show demonstration. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the CO pre-conference CJK Cataloging workshop. The second half of the workshop will include CJK NACO BIBCO Council Seiko updates and Chinese rare book cataloging guidelines working group updates. So let's start with NACO update. Are you here?
Yes.
Okay, let me introduce you first.
Thank you.
Okay. So she then is the head of CJK Cataloging and Metadata Unit at UC San Diego. She has been the CJK NACO project coordinator since 2016. She is an active CO member who has served on several CO committees. She then co-authored an article on the development of the PCC funnel programs. I will post the article information in the chat box. So please welcome Shiden.
Thank you, Nami. And thanks to CTP members for the opportunity for providing NACO updates since March 2021. And I would also like to thank to Hideyuki Muramoto from Columbia University and Jesslyn Zoom from Library of Congress that we prepared this presentation together. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have done this kind of update in the past few years. Start with the NACO documentation update on the PCC website, and then review the DCM Z1 LC guidelines supplement updates from the last year, and also OCLC WordKite validation release notes on OCLC MARC authority update. We will have a brief update on PCC Wiki data pilot. There's no update from NACO advisor group, so it's not covered. And RDA update has been provided by Charlene, so we're not covered here. Next, please. For NACO documentation that we generally looking at the PCC website on the NACO documentation update page or NACO homepage, usually that they the most recent update documentation is on the top. So from last workshop, there's a 2 update, but not too new to you because we talked about them partially some last workshop. The first one is a PCC policy for partial compilation of work by one agent. This was the result from the CCT feasibility study in 2020. And for if there's any new catalogers, CCT is standing for conventional collective title. And the second one is the FAQ for working with undifferentiated CCT work and expression authority records. So this one was released 2020 October and update in April last year, right after the workshop. Basically, it's aligned the instruction change for the CCT and also excluding authorized access point for music. Next slide, please. So if you remember, this was from last workshop about CCT feasibility study that PCC catalogers asked to, if they want to participate, they will apply RDA 6224 for incomplete collection of literary forms by one agent. Instead, RDA 62210-3 alternative. If you remember, it's kind of like a work selection or poem selection. So this is for work created after 1500. Next slide, please. And after study that PCC decided to make a policy official in May 2021 to apply RDA 6224 for partial compilation of single forms by one agent or partial compilation of multiple forms by one agent. It also includes announcement on the April 2021 revision of the LCPCC PI 62210-3 alternative. So that is modified as the interim policy update number 2. So in this revision, it eliminated the use of CCT for incomplete collection of one agent's work when the work were created after 1500. The instructions are for LC and also for PCC. So here I'm only cited for PCC. If applied, that you will record the title proper of the compilation as its preferred title. Optionally, you can give authorized access point for any or all of the individual work or expression in the compilation in 7XX edit entry field. Next slide, please. So the new policy also apply to translation. You would use original title proper as a preferred title if translated from original compilation, or using title proper of the translation as preferred title if there's no original compilation published. We will have example next slide. And the instruction also provide on classification and collocation, resource in the scope for the new policy. If are classified in class P schedule, you will classify them as separate work instead by collection. So no longer using A6, you will go by the main entry, the title proper of the compilation. And also you can optionally the optionally collocation can be achieved through the use of LCGFT term in the 655 field, which is a genre heading, or in the 680 field, which is the form of work, the attributes of the work or expression. And previously catalog resource will now be actively changed to conform the new policy. Next slide, please. So here's the example that the work, the translation are using the the title proper of the translation for the translation of when the compilation was of the original language was never published. And you notice that the analytic entry for the expression, the language code is coded for Chinese because the compilation was not exist in Chinese. It just the compilation is really translated work. Hope that makes sense to you. I think in this one it's a little bit unique. Next, please. And this slide is putting together focusing on authority work. So if the same compilation has been published more than once under different title, you would choose the most common form of the title or the first published title as a preferred title and recording the other title as variant. So that the need authority work. And there's another situation that if a resource within the scope for the new policy has a manifestation title that is represented as a variant access point in an existing CCD authority record, and you will have a two situation to resolve the conflict. So the first one is that if the variant representing the same resource, you can verify by the 670 that justify that variant. And you would remove the VAP under 670 and apply 6224 for the Bib record. And since the CCT is most likely undifferentiated, and the other situation is the variant doesn't representing the same resource, and this will be the conflict, the variant conflict to the resource you have in hand. A qualifier can be added to the existing CCT authority record, and you don't need to code the record RDA as an exception. And the next part session is the LC PCC PS 62719 on determining conflict that you should be familiar with this. Next slide, please. And this session is talking about what kind of category resource that are not in the scope for new policy. So partial compilation of work by one agent that was created before 1501 does not include in the new policy. Complete compilation of agent works or agents works in one form, partial compilation of work created by more than one agent, and compilation of parts of a single work or excerpts from a single work does not, and compilation of a music work and the law legal document does not covered under new policy. And also series authorized access for multi-part monograph or monograph series, they are not. I put this one at the last one because I think this one sometimes cause confusion, that you need to determine whether that you do as it's a partial compilation or it's a series. And if it's a series, you need to continue to using the CCT. So here's just an example. Next slide, please. So for the next documentation, there's a two FAQ posted prepared and posted by PCC Standard Committee on Training. This two documentation is to help you if you need contact author, creator, contributor, to need more information to break conflict or other. And the guideline provided and also form letter provided here. So when you need to consult, when you need to contact author, and please check out those two. And the first one is for you to provide to the author when you contact them, to help them understand what is authority control and why you contact them and what you would use that information is actually. Next slide, please. So this session, we will go through the DCMZ1 updates and go by under the mark code, the order of the mark code. So the first one is 00832, undifferentiated personal name. And so this instruction just updated to include codes for other types in addition to family that already included. So to have a full picture, that the code, there's 3, and the A is for personal differentiate name, and B is for undifferentiated. And we are clean out the B because in RDA, we're no longer using undifferentiated personal name. And the third code is N. So the N is used for family, corporate body, and place. It's just adding to the instruction, but this is not new. For work expression, if you begin with a personal name and the value is A, otherwise you code it N. So next slide, please. So the next one is for 046 special coded dates. And instruction updated to include a link to full EDTF specification in addition to the LCPCC 9313, and also adding more specific instruction and examples. The first one is using X for unspecified digit from the right. In this example, it's the person active in 1940s, so you would code it 194X. Next slide, please. The next example is recording BC dates, and in this case, you will start with hyphen and then the date minus the actual BC date. So 50 BC would be hyphen 0049. And another instruction is about a repeatability. And in this case, one needed to recording both central date by ISO 8601 standard and the precise date by EDTF, that you are allowed to repeat them in separate 046. And here's the example for person's birth date, because it's a precise date, they are using EDTF, but the active date is by central date. Next slide, please. And the next one is talking about conflicting days. Used to be, we put them all in 046 and using bracket and comma, no space to separate them. And now the PCC instruction to recommend you to recording the date reflect keylogger evaluation. So for example, this one, the keylogger determining 1907 should be used for Hyper-Catherine's birth date. So you would only recording 1907 here, and to put conflict dates in 670. And another instruction they added, ask you to do that at the beginning of the implementation, that we are adding subfield V and subfield U as an option to justify the date in the field instead using 670, and now they want you to remove them for this conflict data, because if you are no longer recording there. So when you remove them, you will need to convert them into 670 if it's not already included in 670. The next one is about the uncertain date resulting from data calculation. This is talking about that you know this person died at age 83 in 1862, and that could, when you calculate back to the birth date, that could correspond to one or two alternative dates. So you, for this one, you will still put that in bracket with comma in between the date. And also for non-Gregorian dates, that you would also convert it to Gregorian date, that if that could correspond to one of the two. And here's the example they provided. Next one, please. So the next instruction that got updated is a 370 associate place. When the place name changed, and keylogger are okay to using the earlier name if that correspond to the annotated time during that the time of the entity being established. So so for this person who grew up in Hong Kong and migrated to France since 1977, so which means that Hong Kong was still under British rule. So it's okay for you to use in Hong Kong instead of Hong Kong, China as the subject usage instruction to say that you will using the latest one, you will not using Hong Kong. So this is a flexibility for you to recording reflect the person's name at the time for that. Next slide, please. So 385 is the attribute for work and expression. And this is the after the field validate and OCLC and PCC added the best practice here. And you see something similar to other attributes that we have been using: prefer controlled vocabulary, recording the source code in subfield 2, capitalize the first term in each subfield A, and recording uncontrolled terms. This one, you have to pay attention. This one is using plural form because you are recording a demographic group. So it need to be a plural. So example it's given here. Next slide, please. Talking about repeatability, if the vocabulary source differ or some term come from controlled vocabulary and some are uncontrolled, you would repeat the field. And for the vocabulary, for the terms come from the same vocabulary terms, that you could either repeat subfield field A or repeat the field. The overall best practice is repeat field when need for clarity. An example given below. Next slide, please. And for subfield M, subfield N on demographic group term and code, right now it's asking you do not using it, but if the record has those code already existed and correct coded, you do not need to remove them. Next slide, please. So 386, the creator and contributor characteristics also as attributes for work and expression. And I'm going to skip the slide, this one, because it's similar to the first one. Next, please. And also repeatability is a similar. Next, please. I want to stop here on relationship information. This one you are allowed to adding the relationship, either the mark related term, RDA relationship designator, or RBMI's the rare book relationship designator. And you would capitalize first letter, recorded in singular, and follow the relationship term with a column. So example here, and if multiple relationship term apply for a single group, that you will repeat the field. Next slide. If a different relationship term apply to some of the creator and the contributors, and then there's a two way to do it. You can using that term for repeated subfield A for those groups, or you can repeat it by the 386 field. Next slide, please. So this is the same as the 385 that do not using subfield M, subfield N. Next slide, please. So 670 subfield U are added to DCMZ1 670 instruction that to only add URI. And here I want to remind people that the instruction to say if a URI is included in 670, it must be given in subfield U. This is not new, but you see people still putting the URI in subfield A. So please do not follow those examples. Move to put the URI in subfield U and using the name of the website in subfield A. Next slide, please. So here's the instruction on the subfield U that you need put only in the URI. You do not need to enclose the URI within the parentheses or do not need to put the word in there. So those are just a fake example to illustrate the instruction. So you only need to put the URI in there. I also provide two examples on when you citing the URI or URL that if there's a non-loading data included, somehow the NACO authority record in 670 doesn't like you taking that non-loading data copy into that URL. It will lead to the landing page of the Wikipedia. So if you want to cite it, you want to copy the whole URL, it will automatically provide the coding. And then the other one is that it doesn't taking the ending parentheses as a part of a URL. So when you click on that, it will tell you that we don't find this entry, but it actually because that ending parentheses. So in this case, you may want to skip that, not using that URL because it doesn't help other catalogers. Next slide, please. So for OCLC MARC authority updates, those are part of OCLC archive validation release notes, and they are based on MARC 21 authority updates. And the September is based on the number 32. They just to tell the community OCLC has validation rules set for those mark field or subfields, and but for catalogger you only need to know they are coming, but you cannot use them until you see PCC instruction. So generally in DCMZ1 or LC mark guide supplement guideline. It's the same for the next slide. The February update is based on the MARC 21 authority update number 33. Next slide, please. So for PCC Wiki Data Pilot Project, so the project, as I mentioned in the past, is a facilitates NACO light approach that would lower the barrier to authority creation and maintenance, and is sponsored by PCC Identity Management Task Group. And the project is ended in December. Right now, PCC is based on the result and determining the future. Excuse me, and sorry. There's the information about the meeting notes, slides, and helpful tools to use to contribute Wikidata. Next slide, please. And also there are 44 participants created a dashboard to show the activity of this pilot project. I think that's all I have for the NACO updates. And next slide, please. So for the time frame that I want to go ahead and go to the next session. So if you have question, we can hold it. So next one, I want to give an update on CJK NACO best practice and the project report. And the 2 CJK NACO best practice has been posted recently. And the first one is the best practice for Chinese Korean personal names in Japanese publication. This was presented by Miyako Maisa from Stanford on behalf of the Japanese NACO reviewer group. We just put on CJK NACO project page, so it's easy for NACO cataloger to looking into that, consulting the documentation as needed. The second one is recording non-mark 8 character in authority record. So if you were here in the workshop last year that we recommending to using NCR notation presented by Eric Chang, but for the unforeseeable consequence that we have to put it on hold and not implanting it, but we still need to address the, so we try to restore the best practice documentation and to facilitate identify non-Latin mark character and for future conversion that excuse me, it's easier to using a Gata symbol to for searching them, to put them together when NACO authority file are ready to taking full Unicode. So the recommendation, this one is the new, to using a Gata symbol for the non-mark 8 character in 4XX non-Latin reference. If an alternative is not available in LC CJK compatibility database. So here's an example. And then the second point is that we will give a phrase to record Unicode of the non-mark 8 character. And this standard phrase is not changed. This from the old best practice. And the revised session is to make it an option to provide the romanization of the non-mark 8 character in bracket. And we provide 4 different scenarios with the example. Next slide, please. So, so scenario 1 is that you're using alternative if available in LC CJK capability database. And scenario 2 is that you're using Gata symbol and the Unicode provided in LC CJK capability database. And scenario 3 is that you're using Gata symbol and the Unicode from Unihan database if you could not find it in LC CJK capability database. And scenario 4 is that because we had the best practice to ask Keylogger to recording only romanization of the non-mark 8 in bracket. So we have those records. If you encounter them, please also add the one with the Gata symbol. So that's the best practice. And for membership and the independent stats from last year, for membership are total 38. We have a few inactive membership removed, and we also has 3 new membership. So Hinjin Jung from University of Notre Dame, and Xiping Liu from University of Houston, and Xiu Lin from New York University. Welcome board. And independent status awarded during last year are Kumiko Recker from Indiana University on personal name, and Lucian Liu from Metropolitan Museum of Art on personal name. We also review Library of Hong Kong and Macau from their 2019 training, and Education University of Hong Kong awarded independent status for personal name, and Hong Kong Baptist University also for personal name. And congratulations to library and NACO catalogers, and also thanks to NACO reviewer who did work to training and review for those catalogers. Next slide, please. The last but not least is on the update on the CJK final reference project. The project coordinator has been really busy prepare the training material and have it posted in on the CJK NACO project website. They are also finishing up on the update for the project FAQ page. And training will be scheduled separately this time by coordinators of each language. Volunteer will be notified thanks to the project coordinator Jiaxu from Yale, Wei Zheng from Columbia, Miyako Maza from Stanford, Aiko Chang from University of Hawaii, and also thanks to all the project volunteer. Next slide, please. Thanks to all CJK NACO catalog for your contribution and support. My slide's done. Thank you.
The presenter is Leah Contursi. She's a non-Roman script languages team leader at Princeton University. Please take it away, Leah.
Thank you, Naomi. I will be brief. I only have 5 minutes and I would like to give 2 updates. The first update is about the statistics for Bibco CJK funnel. As you know, the statistics are taken between April and October, and then the second period between October and the following March. So I took these statistics for the first semester last year. As you can see, we only have 2 contributing libraries at the moment. The numbers of production are not high, but this is most likely reflective of the difficult past 2 years for every library and the recalibration of priorities of every single library. But if we go to the next slide, we can see that the numbers are getting a little higher. Probably, hopefully a sign that things are getting a little better in terms of work in our libraries and the priorities that we are recalibrating again. So I would like to thank these 2 institutions that helped keep the Bibco CJK funnel alive. And I want to thank them very much for their contributions. But I also would like to add that as you all know, the PCC records are the hallmark of every PCC record is in fact that all the access points are traced and controlled. And so if you are already doing all the work in NACO and you keep up with all the updates that have been done in the past, that have been showed in the past session by Shuteng, then moving forward and just marking your record as a PCC record, it's only one small step. So I would like to encourage all the catalogers who are doing already a lot of wonderful NACO work to consider to join the CJK funnel, because you don't have a minimum requirement of records that need to be produced. It's any number of records is fine, and that's 4. And that's why we have created this Bibco CJK funnel some time ago. So another little update, if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, here we are, Romanization table. There is under consideration and under review a proposal for a new update of the Japanese Romanization table. It's funny that we have in the past hour heard how there is some advocacy to get away a little bit from Romanization. I personally, if I may say so, and I will take this liberty now, think that Romanization is very important, especially for CJK languages. And one of the reasons why it is crucially important, in my view, is that the Romanization allows the index lists. Indexing lists are nearly impossible for characters, for CJK, in CJK characters. And if we eliminate the index lists, we take away the power of browsing of our catalogs. And browsing is very, very important. So here we are. I want to say a few words about the new Japanese Romanization proposal, updates of the current Japanese Romanization table. As you can see, the date goes back to 2018, and this is only because at some point immediately after 2018, I would say towards the end of that year and beginning of 2019, the Library of Congress placed a pause to the new submissions. And this is because the Library of Congress wanted to reconsider the guidelines that they use, and they wanted to make an effort to make the entire reviewing process a lot more transparent. So the Library of Congress joined with the two sections of the ALA groups, the ALA section for African and Asian material, the cataloging of African and Asian material, and also with the CCDA, the section at ALA for description and access. So together, members from both groups, together with members of the Library of Congress, decided to to brainstorm and find a way to make things as transparent as possible, but also as effective and rapidly as feasible. So after much consideration, the review board was appointed new members. So the review board for the ALA Romanization table consists of 7 members, 3 LC representatives, and the Library of Congress representatives are permanent members, and 4 rotating representatives, 2 from the ALA section of African and Asian material, and 2 representatives from CCDA. After reviewing the guidelines in May 2021, yes, the new procedures were announced, were implemented, and posted on the website. At that point, in September 2021, the new proposal for updates of the Japanese Romanization table were submitted. And here I have the first page of that proposal, which lists all the members, the editorial members. And this is a very comprehensive update. It's a very complex new revision made of 35 pages, so it's not for the faint-hearted. And by the same token, the review is also complex because the whole table is quite complex. So if we go to the next page, thank you. We have, I wanted to list here the members of the review subcommittee. So when the ALA Romanization table was submitted to the Library of Congress, the review board nominated 4 members for the review subcommittee, and these are 4 members that who are specialists in the language. They are doing an exceptionally complex work So we are very, very grateful to all the effort that they're making. The table is still under review, specifically because it's very complex, but also because after the first round of reviews done by all these specialists that you see on the page, let me call them Keiko Hill, Toshi Mara, Mieko Matza, and Tara McGowan. They are doing exceptionally hard work. So after their first review, according to the procedures, the table was posted to various listservs, and so there was a period of a month free for everybody to chime in and give their recommendations. So if we go to the next slide, I want to show the names of all the people who the specialists in the language and librarians and catalogers who have contributed with incredibly detailed comments. They were all very important. They were all taken into very dear consideration, and they were sent back to the review subcommittee. The review right now is just finalizing the changes and making the final checkpoints. So if we go to the next slide, I want to show you just a little sneak peek. On the left-hand side, you see a little section about the punctuation in the current Japanese ALA romanization table, while on the right, you can see how the punctuation has expanded, all the explanations. So it makes things much, much clearer. And if you go to the next slide, another little preview, it's also, this was considered very important. The language that is used now is like cross-references, goes back, this is just one example, but it goes back to the AACR2 times. And so now the language on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, as you can see in the new proposal, is aligned with the language of RDA. So it has been modernized and kept up to date. These are only a couple of sneak previews. Of course, the changes are not merely cosmetic, but they are quite substantial. Like, for example, updates on the division of words. You all know how important it is. Another major section is the way we do the treatment of foreign words and neologisms with the new proposal. So it's quite comprehensive and quite complex. And finally, on the last slide, if we go, if we move forward one last, thank you. So as I said, the Japanese romanization table is still under the last steps of the review. It's probably going to be, it's underway, but it's really at the very final stage. So keep an eye on announcement of the new approved ALA romanization table. The announcement will be posted on various listservs. And once they are announced, actually at the moment they are announced, the new romanization table will also be posted in the usual page, the screenshot of the page that you see here, where all the romanization tables are kept, and it will be substituted to the current Japanese romanization table that you can see on this screen that goes back to 2012. And this is everything that I have to say about updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, let's move on to the next one, Council update. Okay,
Yes,
once again, we will hear from Charlene Zhou, sorry, the head of knowledge access at the New York University. Go ahead, Charlene.
Yes. Okay, I will provide very brief update. So first from the funnel, and then council update, and then some of the future plan. Next slide, please. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so we have received less record to review. As I mentioned before, actually, Council CJK Folio still at the early stage. And Steve Shadow from University of Washington still review Japanese serial. And Kathy Wen, she couldn't review the Chinese serials because the job changes and the Elma migration, etc. So I'm still the acting reviewer for Chinese record. So in February, Charlene provide orientation and training to a new participant, Greta Hen. She's the cataloging and metadata strategist librarian at San Diego State University. So welcome, Greta. Next slide, please. So first, I want to say, as I mentioned last year, for Council cataloging module, those missing modules, our colleague Becky Cobson from UC San Diego coordinated. So now all new module has been revised and uploaded. So just go to the Council website and just review those new modules. The one I really want to emphasize is so important for CJK serials is the CCM 17.7. And this is including for the reprint serials, which is, as you know, still a lot of CJK serials have the reprint. And so the chief editor is Renee Chin from UC San Diego. And as you know, I report in 2019 is we had to make some interim decision from the last council coordinator, last Hawkins, is because there's a mix of AACR2 and Rda instruction. So for example, we also received a request, I remember from Princeton, is you do see a lot of reprints here with ISBN number. So as you can see, this new module, including this kind of very specific instruction, which is very important for CJK community, is that you can see ISBN number, the first indicate 8, and with a qualified individual volume number or set. The 500 note also have this instruction. Also, I want to just thank our colleagues, Shida and Erica Chang, and contribute the Chinese and Japanese Korean record. Of course, we have to thank Hideki Morimoto to review all the examples. And we still have a remaining question about title changes. And I will mention earlier how we email LC. Oh, okay. So, So the Morimoto already mentioned something wrong. Oh, okay. So that one I will correct my example. Sorry, I should get this review by Morimoto. Next slide, please. Okay, so and as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, LC already make announcement about Rda narrative metadata guidance documentation. So I just want to let you know, I really want to mention 2 documentation related to serials. So this will be relationship WEMI, and also the other one for serial work and integrating work decision. The one for WEMI, and including one is for reprint serials. The other one, I just want to let you know, this is something clearly defined if it's something simultaneous issue in both print online as manifestation of the same work. And for a serial cease in one media carry type and continue in another, and then a new work will be created. So I just want you to pay attention to this kind of changes. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the one I mentioned to you with an email to LC. This one, Steve Shadow emailed me, and I also discussed with Renee Chin, because we still discovered some issues there. Under the CCM 17.7 and the CEG L4. Actually, I really bolded 2 sentences here with belief they are contradicting. And we have the chief source to transcribe the title will be really reprint title page. However, still have instruction mentioned about 780, 785 for title changes. But we do have one case is the reprint set has only the later title, but the reprint set include both the earlier title and later title. So if we follow Rda 1.11, should be just one record. But if we follow the PCCPS, LCPCCPS carry from PCC ACR to practice, and that should be 2 records. However, we already emailed this, I think, several weeks ago. I haven't received a reply from LC. Next slide, please. So future plan. So as you see, our funnel is still at a kind of early stage. We still want to provide training to all the participants and hopefully they can be independent soon. And I just want to let you know, we won't give up. We will continue to pursue the answer from our colleague from LC. Is really want to try to get resolution. And also we will continue to collaborate with EARN for the cooperative cataloging project. We think still a lot of e-journals project, maybe we can work together. And also things because open access meta share globally has been promoted by PCC open meta policy. We're looking forward to more opportunity to work on this kind of open access e-journals. Next slide. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Okay, now let's move on to the Seiko update by Stellatan. Stella is the electronic resources and serials metadata librarian at UC Berkeley, and she was formerly the Chinese cataloging librarian at Berkeley's East Asian Library. Okay, please go ahead, Stella.
I talk while I was muted. Okay, so I'm Stellatan on behalf of the Seiko CJK funnel implementation team. I'm here today to give you a report of the establishment and planning of the funnel. Next slide. Are you ready on the next slide? Excuse me. These are the main topics or the main area that I will go over and tell you a little bit about the funnel project. Next slide. A little recap of the idea and how the establishment of the funnel idea came up. It all started because of the 2018 serial cataloging workshop, and to have a Seiko funnel project was discussed, and the idea was supported by the serial community. Next slide. So we established an implementation team, and we started to plan the training coordinated with LC Seiko coordinator. And Janice Young, the coordinator of the Seiko at LC, gave us 7 training webinars. Those are really intensive training. Next slide. So we start according to the advice of the LC Seiko. We started to recruit member and participants first. And LC recommended us to divide the participant in 2 groups, one smaller group as the core participant and the larger group as the observers. So the difference is the observer were not interactively participated in the training. They mainly like as sit in and listen to the webinar. Next slide. So we have 12 participants from 10 institutions expressed their interest in joining the funnel after the training and after the project was officially established. So but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, so implementation group decided to delay the application. Next slide. And then in November 2021, application was submitted and CJK Seiko funnel was officially established in December 2021. With here, I really want to thank Paul Frank from LC, and he really supported us particularly in establishing the profile in the PCC directory, because the original form we tried to use to submit is not very clear, and we had a communication back and forth, and Paul Frank was just saying, let me just go ahead and do it for you. So that saved us a lot of trouble. Next slide. We now have 12 institution members as the funnel's core funnel members. Within the 12, we have 2, we call it, or Paul Frank called it, quote unquote, individual members. These 2 members, they're in own institution already joining Seiko, and they really would like to join the funnel, but their institution would like them to enter the statistic if they have any proposal to their own institution's statistic. So Paul Frank suggested to have this 2 separate profiles set up in the directory, so they have their own control of the profile, but they are also marked as members of the Seiko CJK funnel. Next slide. So to show you a screenshot in the PCC directory, the core members of the core institution, which include the 2 individual members. Next slide. So it's official now. So what are we going to do? So the implementation team and the core member will discuss and develop a work model that works efficiently and convenient to everyone to submit their proposal. So we accept any proposal as long as they submit with the proposal the proof for a good reason and proof for us to further investigate and develop a good, nice proposal. In that way, the term might have higher chance to be accepted by the LC Seiko. Next slide. So what model or platform we need? So we thought of different things, or based on some of the existing members in the implementation team. Maybe one of our members, she had the experience of using a Google form for the Seiko suggestions, and people seems like they really like that idea very much, and it has a good feedback. So maybe we'll continue to use that. Or what about the other suggestions? Maybe, you know, if we want to make good use of the SEO platform, maybe we need to talk to the SEO IT team, or maybe we need any other suggestion from the SEO community. But the idea is we will need to choose the most efficient way. Next slide. Just give you a screenshot of the Google form based on our implementation team. Actually, that's from Charlene, the funnels co-coordinator. I personally like this very much. So it may be we will use that, but we will let everyone know and the core member know about this. Next slide. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we welcome all proposals, but we do need them to provide us the citation of the resources that they found to prove the need of a new term or changes of the terms. And I listed some of the proposal that we received from the email or personally from librarians, so in catalogers. And the last one that's listed, that's a suggestion from one of our implementation team member. And I really like that suggestion. I myself, when I catalog Chinese gazetteers, I created a lot of Chinese place names. As you all know, Chinese place name changes every year and a lot of changes. So, but that requires a lot of work because so many changes, but I think everyone and every proposal helps. Next slide. So, this is a list of the CJK related terms that's listed in the January 31st, 2022 LCD GT database. So it's just some, here is just some of them. So by reading at the list, we all know and understand totally the terms are important, not only to the library staff, to the cataloger, but in general to our library users to successfully retrieve, identify, and locate the library resources that they need. Next slide. That's the end of our report. And I thank you, Naomi and her team, to advance the slides for us. Thank you.
Okay, so last fall, CTP formed this working group to review and update the current Chinese rare book cataloging guidelines. Haijin Lin, the chair of the working group, will tell us about their activities so far. Haijin is the head of the Technical Services Unit and a Chinese cataloger at CV Star East Asian Library, UC Berkeley. He is currently working on updating and enhancing Chinese rare book catalog records. Please take it away, Haijin. Haijin, you may be muted.
Sorry about that. I'll try to make it shorter. Thank you, Naomi, for your introduction and give me the 5 minutes time to briefly report our working group. This is a first report. We haven't finished yet, and everything is just beginning. This is members of our group. The milestone. Remember the title of this guideline is the cataloging guidelines for creating Chinese rare books records in machine readable forms. But in 2018, the new version, the machine readable form is removed from the title. That's actually, it is a significant change because the machine readable is not the issues for our cataloging now. We are moving to the machine understandable. Today, a lot of people are talking about the linked data or something like this. It's about machine understandable. That's why we form this group to review our cataloging guidelines along with the technology change. This is charge, I just pass it. At the beginning, we did some environmental scanning. We examined the significant change in the field of Chinese rare book cataloging in recent years, particularly the impact of digitalization projects, the new development of RDA, and new technologies such as Bib Frame and linked data, how this new technology impact in cataloging guidelines. I want to say a little bit more about the digitalization project. As we see, the Library of Congress, Harvard, at Berkeley, we publish a lot of the digitalization Chinese rare books data online, so people can access freely through the the website and can see the Chinese rare books rather than just go to the library to see the printed book. It is really a big change in the Chinese rare book cataloging community. As a conclusion, we all agree that the mark will still be the mainstream of the cataloging for a while in the future. It is a little bit different with the people talking here. And this effort, the revise of the Chinese rare book cataloging guidelines, will remain based on the Mark 21st. And obviously, we also will focus on how to demonstrate the connection between the printed version of the Chinese rare books and this digital copy. We try to make our work on an evidence-based approach rather than just based on the personal experience and understanding. So to understand the current of Chinese cataloging, rare book cataloging, we randomly selected 4,000 titles from several catalogers and export 26,000 cataloging records for those titles from OCSC databases. The 4,000 titles majority from the 四库传输总目 and other catalogers like 只在输入题解 So we randomly selected them. So it is good the statistical samples. We tried to identify the problem of the Chinese rare book cataloging so far and set up our priority. This is some result we get from this sample set. The cataloging languages obviously is English, coded as English languages is the majority. And we also have the Japanese and the Chinese. That's why we so many cataloging languages. That's why we have 26,000 records for 4,000 titles. Each title probably have the 5 or 6 records in OCSC. And the use of the guidelines, majority is records that didn't claim what guidelines they are using. It's about 77%. But luckily, we found 4,008, about 4,000 records claim they're following the CGCRB, which is a Chinese rare book cataloging guideline. It's occupied about 20%. And also, we found some records claim them following the RDA. 600 records, about 2%. Interestingly, we also found some records that claim themselves following both CGCRB and RDA. So big players. So who cataloging the Chinese rare books and follow which kind of guidelines? This table is the contributions of the cataloging record within the 26,000 records. YNH, I think it's a half engine, is a big player. They contribute about 3,000 records. But unfortunately, we cannot see in the other 3 tables because they didn't claim which cataloging role they are using. And the RDA, Library of Congress, they contributed 226 records, but more than 100 records, they claim they following the RDA, occupied about the 61% of their record is following the RDA. This is very interesting. For the library, they're following the RDA to catalog Chinese rare books. It's interesting. Actually, I definitely want to discuss with the Library of Congress cataloger how if there's any challenges for Chinese rare books following the RDA, or what's the benefit to do that. And the CGCRB, I think the CHHRP, probably the Chinese rare book cataloging project, they contributed 500 records. and all the recorded contributor is following the CGCRB. And the PUL probably is the Princeton. They also compute quite a lot record following the CGCRB. And the last one, it's very interesting, is a combination of the RDA and the CGCRB. It's a Hong Kong University. Actually, RDA and the combination with RDA and the CGCRB with our inspection. So definitely, I'm glad to see we can see some certain amount of the record following the both RDA and the CGCRB. And within the 26th record, we can find the mark field they're using. 255 obviously is the top one. We also compare to the 88 field vernacular. It's a similar, right? It's a 23,000 record. And the 300 always in English, we couldn't find it in the 88 field. And the 260, 260 is both 260 and the 264. We also have the large amount of record includes 264 as well as the 88 field. And the 500 field, 500 is a significantly important for Chinese rare books. A lot of information is recorded in 500 field. And then we also can see the 580 field is also large number of the cataloging have 80 field of 500. And then you can see this is some different number. Some 88 field only have for the English or normalizations, but some is only just vernacular. So this is the market field use. It will help us to identify the core elements of the Chinese rare book cataloging. The topics we have discussed so far focus on 3 topics. One is scope of guidelines. The second is the cataloging languages and the vernacular uses. And the third one is edition statement and the 255, how to use the 255. Oh, sorry, 250. The scope of the guidelines, the current guideline, we have a scope which is 1759, I think it's for the Chinese rare book, Sanbenshu. And then the scope is extended to the before 1912. And then now we are thinking our guideline is based on the traditional Chinese books, which means the texts are written in classic Chinese. They have the classic bounding and also produced using pre-modern print and writing technologies like manuscripts and word block printing. We are struggling. Do we need a time frame for that? This is the scope of the guidelines. And a big discussion about state edition statement. You can see this is various of the statement in Chinese rare books cataloging. We are not able to see the people following the consistent role to record the statement, edition statement in the Chinese rare book cataloging. You can see it's various. And some people are recording like publisher as well as the publishing date, or just simply record as the word block printing, manuscript, kind of things. So it is an area we are set up the priority to further explore. Related to this problem, we have the case study talking about how to record the Kerbon. Kerbon is a very special terms used in the Chinese rare book cataloging. In general, we have word block printing. Current guidelines, we record the Kerbin in 250. But there's some problem. This brings us a big discussion about it. People say, oh, we put Kerbin in 250, easy to be retrieved, make our record easy to be retrieved. People can search Kerbin and get a record. And this is a Chinese tradition. That's true. According to the record we export from OCRC, there's both English record as well as a Chinese record. And the Chinese record is majority provided by Taiwan organizations. And they also use a 250 record Kerbin. So it's not only the mainland of China, but also the Taiwan or Chinese community, they use the 250 to record the Kerbin. And obviously current practice guidelines, we required 250, use a 250 to record the Kerbin. But the other side, we use a 250 recorded Kerbin. There's a conflict with RDA rules. The RDA rules say the 250 is transcribed from the materials, but Kerbin obviously is not. It's a description rather than transcript information from the material we have. And in comparable with the other languages, particular Japanese Red Book guideline, it's a big conflict with them. And ambitious because semantically, a Kerbin is not an addition statement. The addition in Western printing is much different with the addition, the meaning of addition in Chinese Red Book. So 250, my understanding is for the Western addition, the meaning of the Western context rather than Chinese Red Book. So we don't have the agreement yet. We continue to discuss and debate and argue about this, how to use the 250. And we welcome everyone, if interested in the Chinese Red Books, join us, join the conversation we have, join the argument we have, bring your idea in here. We definitely want your input. So we also have some solution for this. One solution is proposed by the Zheng Wei. She suggests we can use a 6055 field to record this information about Kerbin. Another solution is we continue use 500, but we put the subfield 3 material specific. We can say this is a Chinese Red Books, but no conclusion. Keep talking, discussion about these issues. Another one, we also reviewed the 255 and 245 and 246 field. 245 field, we focused on how to record the Zhuan. Zhuan is a particular important element in Chinese Red Books. It's a kind of the chapters. In traditional, we just row. Each rows have each chapters, so Zhuan becomes the important element for Chinese Red Books. But you can see it's also varies to record Chinese Zhuan in 255 field. This is the area we also want to working for. And also 246 field, we are focused on the source of information, which para titles or other spine titles or the information comes from. Next step, we are going to define the core element of Chinese Red Book catalog record. It is not easy job. It is we're remodeling Chinese Red Books, and in particular, we are focused on the 5 access field. because a lot of the core elements is recorded in file access field so far. And we also were following the Rda principles as well, consider of specific of Chinese rare books to Romanize the cataloging languages. Actually, today, a lot of the presentators talking about the cataloging languages. We coded our record as ENG, which is our cataloging is English languages. But we also face the challenges how to describe the special features of Chinese rare books in English. It is a big challenge. A lot of the records only use vernacular to describe Chinese rare books, some features of Chinese rare books. So we need a clear guideline and standardize how to use the vernacular in descriptive field. And then we are going to recommend the relationship of destinators for Chinese rare books in accordance with the Rda relationship destinators. This is also the challenge for the Chinese rare books. Our Chinese traditional authorship is quite different with English, and the Rda is based on the English context. So how to coordinate it to culture background, it will be the challenge, but we do like everyone who interested in Chinese rare books join us a conversation, make a contribution. We really want to listen from you. Thank you. And I also want to thank you all our members, Cao, all members. I really enjoy discussing them. Sometimes we argued, we debate, but it's really interesting discussion. Thank you all.